Crime scene tape surrounding a home in Daphne this morning. Inside, investigators say a man shot and killed his wife and 2 children, then shot himself.
January 10th, 2026. Just before 7 p.m., a 911 call shattered the quiet of Cedar Bluff, Mississippi, a small rural community in Clay County where everyone knew everyone, where families had lived for generations, where violence like this simply didn't happen. "We have gunshot victims on Blake Road," the dispatcher reported. Deputies rushed to the scene, arriving at 7:03 p.m. But as they began their investigation, a horrifying truth emerged. This wasn't just one crime scene. This was the second location in an escalating nightmare that had already claimed multiple lives. Within the next few hours, law enforcement would discover not 3, but 4 separate crime scenes scattered across western Clay County. 6 people would be gone. A 7-year-old child would be among the victims, and the suspect would be someone the family never saw coming, someone they thought they knew. When 24-year-old Daricka Moore was escorted past reporters after his court appearance on Monday, January 12th, a journalist asked him a simple question. "Why did you take the lives of 6 people?" His response stopped everyone cold. "It was 13, Moore said calmly. "Not 6. 13. The implication was terrifying. Had Moore intended to harm 13 people that night? Did he have a list? Were there 7 more potential victims who escaped simply by chance? Or was this statement the rambling of someone completely detached from reality? Investigators are still trying to understand what those 2 words mean. But one thing is certain. What happened on the night of January 10th, 2026, was one of the deadliest family attacks in Mississippi's recent history. Clay County Sheriff Eddie Scott, with nearly 30 years of law enforcement experience, called this case one of the toughest ones we had to work in his entire career. District Attorney Scott Collum, who announced he would seek the death penalty, said it was the worst case he'd seen in a decade. What makes this case particularly haunting is that nobody saw it coming. "This guy wasn't on our radar," Sheriff Scott said. Online court records show Moore had no previous criminal charges, no history of violence, no red flags that would have warned anyone. The victims included his own father, his brother, his uncle, and a 7-year-old second cousin described by family as an angel on earth, literally, the dancing queen. 2 others, a pastor and his brother who attended the same church as Moore's family, were also taken that night. How does a 24-year-old man with no criminal history suddenly turn on his own family in such a calculated way? What happened in those 4.5 hours between the first 911 call and Moore's arrest? Why did he target these specific people? And what did he mean when he said, "It was 13"? The investigation is still unfolding. Moore has pleaded not guilty to all charges, including 3 counts of capital murder and 3 counts of first-degree homicide. He's been ordered to undergo a mental health evaluation. But as of now, authorities say the motive for these chilling attacks remains unknown. This is the story of one of the deadliest nights in Mississippi's history. A story that began in a family home and ended with 6 lives lost and a community forever changed. What really happened on that Friday night in Cedar Bluff? And what turned Daricka Moore into someone capable of such violence? Cedar Bluff is an unincorporated community in western Clay County, Mississippi, near the Alabama border. It's the kind of place where neighbors know each other's names, where families gather at small white-frame churches on Sundays, and where violent crime is virtually unheard of. The Moore family had deep roots in this community. Glenn Moore, 67, was known as the family fisherman, a man who always had a hug and a smile for his relatives. His son, Quentin, 33, was married with 3 children and worked hard to provide for his family. Willie Ed Geens, 55, was the family jokester, beloved by his children and grandchildren. And then there was Daricka Moore, 24, Glenn's younger son and Quentin's brother. Very little is known about Daricka Moore's life before January 10th, 2026. He lived in Cedar Bluff. He had no criminal record. He wasn't on law enforcement's radar. He seemed to blend into the background of this small community. Sheriff Scott emphasized this point. This guy wasn't on our radar. This is family members that he went after. There were no documented mental health issues, no history of domestic violence, no previous arrests or complaints. By all accounts, Daricka Moore was simply another young man in a rural Mississippi town. But something was building beneath the surface, something that would explode into violence on a cold January evening. The rampage began at 123 David Hill Road, the Moore family's mobile home on a dirt road in western Clay County. This was where Daricka's father, Glenn, lived, along with other family members. What exactly happened inside that home may never be fully known, but the results were devastating. Investigators determined that Moore shot and ended the lives of 3 family members: his father, Glenn Moore, 67, his uncle, Willie Ed Guines, 55, and his brother, Quentin Moore, 33. All 3 men were found with gunshot wounds to the head. There was no struggle, no signs that the victims had tried to fight back. The attacks appeared calculated and methodical. After taking the lives of his father, brother, and uncle, Moore did something that would help investigators track his movements throughout the night. He stole his brother Quentin's Ford F-150 pickup truck. Then he drove away, leaving 3 bodies behind in the family home. At 6:56 p.m., Clay County 911 received the first emergency call. Someone at 299 Blake Road had reported gunshot victims. Deputies were dispatched immediately, arriving at the scene at 7:03 p.m. This was the home of another relative, a cousin's house, just a few miles from David Hill Road. What happened at this location was perhaps the most disturbing part of the entire night. According to Sheriff Scott, Moore forced his way into the home and attempted to commit a harmful act. Then, in front of witnesses, he put a weapon to the head of a 7-year-old girl and ended her life. The child's name was Michaelia Guines, Moore's second cousin. The mother and at least 2 other children were in the home when this happened. They witnessed everything. Sheriff Scott said that according to witnesses, Moore then placed a weapon against an even younger child's head, but she was not harmed. It was unclear whether he did not pull the trigger or the weapon misfired. A little girl's life may have been spared by mechanical failure, or perhaps by a split-second decision. No one knows which. Sheriff Scott later told the press, "I don't know what kind of motive you could have to harm a 7-year-old." Moore left the Blake Road home in the stolen Ford F-150. But his night wasn't over. He drove to 1965 Salome Griffith Road, where he carefully hid the pickup truck behind a house. Then he broke in through the back entrance. Inside, he found 2 men, Barry Bradley and Samuel Bradley, from Columbus, Mississippi. Barry Bradley, 63, was a pastor. Samuel Bradley, 61, was his brother. One of the Bradley brothers was a pastor at the Apostolic Church of the Lord Jesus, a local church that some of Moore's family members attended. They spent weekends on the church grounds in this small residence. Both men were ended with gunshot wounds to the head, just like the others. Moore then stole a second vehicle from the Bradley residence, leaving his brother's truck hidden behind the house. Why did Moore target the Bradley brothers? Were they simply in the wrong place at the wrong time? Or was there a connection investigators haven't yet uncovered? The motive remains unknown. As deputies responded to the Blake Road call and began piecing together what was happening, they quickly realized they were dealing with an active threat. A man was moving through Clay County with weapons, harming people at multiple locations. Law enforcement from numerous agencies flooded the area: Mississippi Highway Patrol, Mississippi Bureau of Investigation, Mississippi Bureau of Narcotics, U.S. Marshals, U.S. Park Service agents. All descended on western Clay County. They established roadblocks. They secured the crime scenes. They searched for Daricka Moore. Law enforcement officers took Moore into custody without incident at the intersection of Pine Grove Road and Joe Myers Road. The time was 11:24 p.m., 4.5 hours after the first 911 call. He was found driving the second stolen vehicle, which had been taken from the Bradley residence. When arrested, Moore had both a rifle and a handgun in his possession. Officers are still investigating where he obtained the weapons. Moore was booked into the Clay County Jail at 3:25 a.m. on Saturday, January 11th. He was held without bail. The rampage was over. 6 people were gone. A community was shattered. But the questions were just beginning. Initially, authorities reported 3 separate crime scenes. But as the investigation continued, they discovered a 4th location had been involved in the timeline of events. Each scene told a piece of the story. The family home on David Hill Road, where 3 men were found gone. The cousin's house on Blake Road, where a child lost her life in front of her family. The church residence on Salome Griffith Road, where 2 men of faith were harmed. And potentially a 4th location that tied into Moore's movements that night. The Mississippi Crime Lab processed each scene, collecting evidence, documenting everything. As the devastating news of the tragedy spread across Mississippi and throughout the entire nation, Family members, close friends, and community members began coming forward to share their most precious memories of the 6 beautiful souls they had lost on that dark and terrible January night in Cedar Bluff. Renee Gaines McMillian, Moore's cousin who had grown up alongside many of the victims, spoke about each person with deep sadness, overwhelming grief, and an abundance of love in her heart. She wanted the world to know who these people really were, not just names in a news story, but real human beings with lives, dreams, and families who loved them deeply. About 7-year-old Michaelia Guines, she said with tears streaming down her face. Michaelia, God, she was an angel on earth. Literally, she was the dancing queen. The little girl absolutely loved to dance and would spin around the house with joy and laughter. She brought happiness and light to everyone around her, had a beautiful smile that could brighten anyone's day, and had her whole wonderful life stretching out ahead of her. She was in 2nd grade, loved her family, and was just beginning to discover who she would become. Uncle Glenn Moore, 67 years old, was remembered fondly throughout the community as the family fisherman and a gentle soul. He was a family man through and through. Every time I saw him, no matter what kind of day he was having, he always had a warm hug and a big genuine smile for me and my babies, Renee recalled with emotion in her voice. Glenn was the kind of person who made everyone feel welcome, valued, and loved in his presence. He spent his days fishing at local lakes, sharing stories with his grandchildren, and always being there when his family needed him. Willie Ed Guines, age 55, was known throughout the entire family as the jokester who could make absolutely anyone laugh, even in the darkest times. His girls and his son and his grandkids, they'll have to do life without him now. But as a person, he was the cool uncle you always wanted to be around, she added with a sad smile. His wonderful sense of humor, infectious laughter, and warm personality touched everyone who had the privilege of knowing him. He loved telling jokes, making people smile, and ensuring that every family gathering was filled with joy and happiness. Quentin Moore, age 33, was a devoted and loving husband and father who cared deeply about his family. He left behind his loving wife Kiara and 3 young, innocent children who must now face the incredibly difficult and painful journey of growing up without their father's guidance, love, and support. Quentin worked extremely hard every single day to provide for his family and was known throughout the community as a caring, responsible, and dependable man who always kept his word and helped others whenever he could. The Bradley brothers, Barry and Samuel, were remembered as deeply devoted men of faith who had dedicated their entire lives to serving their community through their passionate church ministry and helping those in need. Barry Bradley, age 63, served faithfully as a pastor at the Apostolic Church of the Lord Jesus, where he touched countless lives with his sermons, kindness, and spiritual guidance. His brother Samuel Bradley, age 61, worked right alongside him, supporting him in all their religious work and community outreach. They spent their weekends at the church grounds, counseling people, leading services, helping others in times of crisis, and spreading their faith and message of hope to everyone they encountered. Sheriff Eddie Scott, a highly respected veteran law enforcement officer with nearly 30 years of dedicated experience investigating crimes in Mississippi, told reporters gathered at a press conference that the motive for these terrible and senseless crimes remains completely unknown at this time. He explained with frustration and sadness that for something this serious, devastating, and horrific to happen, it would absolutely require something drastic happening in someone's life or mind. The haunting question continues to plague everyone involved in this heartbreaking case. What could possibly drive a seemingly normal young man to harm 6 family members and friends in one single night of violence? What kind of reason, grievance, or perceived wrong could there possibly be that would lead to taking the life of an innocent 7-year-old child who had done nothing wrong and had her whole life ahead of her? Investigators and detectives spent countless hours carefully questioning Moore after his arrest, sitting across from him in interrogation rooms, trying desperately to understand what had happened in his mind and why he had done these terrible things. However, despite their best efforts and various questioning techniques, he gave no clear answers, explanations, or reasons for his actions. His mysterious and chilling statement, "It was 13, only made the entire case more confusing, disturbing, and raised even more troubling questions that keep investigators awake at night. Did he actually plan to harm 13 different people that night? Were there 7 other intended victims who escaped death simply by chance, luck, or circumstance? Or was this just a meaningless number with no significance at all? Experts and psychologists who have spent many years studying family violence, mass attacks, and the psychological profiles of people who commit such crimes point to several possible reasons and triggers that could lead to such devastating events. These potential factors include severe and overwhelming financial problems that create unbearable stress and desperation, serious mental illness that goes undiagnosed and untreated for years, deep feelings of betrayal by family members or loved ones, extreme paranoia and delusions, or a complete and total psychological breakdown, where someone loses all touch with reality and can no longer distinguish right from wrong. However, in Moore's specific and puzzling case, there's no clear evidence, warning signs, or documentation pointing to any single cause, trigger, or explanation. He had absolutely no criminal record of any kind, no known history of violence or aggressive behavior, no documented mental health issues or treatments before this tragedy happened, and no complaints from neighbors or family members about concerning behavior. Sheriff Scott expressed his deep frustration, confusion, and sadness about the entire situation, saying with emotion, "A situation like this, you've got a family member viciously attacking their own family members, people who loved him and trusted him. Whatever the reason is, whatever was going through his mind, we're desperately hoping that we'll find out eventually, so we can try to make some sense of this senseless tragedy." On Monday morning, January 12th, just 2 short days after the horrific tragedy that shocked the entire state, Daricka Moore made his very first appearance in Clay County Circuit Court in West Point, Mississippi. The historic courtroom was completely packed to capacity with grieving and devastated family members, concerned local officials, numerous reporters and news crews, and state law enforcement officers who had worked tirelessly on investigating the case. The atmosphere in the courtroom was tense, emotional, and heavy with grief. Some family members sat quietly with tears running down their faces. Others stared at Moore with expressions of pain, confusion, and disbelief. Many struggled to understand how someone from their own family could have done something so terrible. Moore faces extremely serious criminal charges that could ultimately result in him receiving the death penalty under Mississippi state law. He is formally charged with 3 counts of capital murder for the tragic deaths of 7-year-old Makilia Goines, Pastor Barry Bradley, and Samuel Bradley. He also faces 3 additional counts of first-degree murder for killing his own father, Glenn Moore, his brother Quinton Moore, and his uncle Willie Ed Gins, his own flesh and blood. Additionally, Moore is charged with attempted murder for trying to harm another young child who miraculously survived, burglary of a dwelling for breaking into the Bradley brothers' residence, and 2 separate counts of felony motor vehicle theft, one for stealing his brother Quinton's Ford F-150 pickup truck, and another for taking a vehicle from the Bradley residence after killing them. As Assistant District Attorney Trina Davidson Brooks stood up and read each serious charge out loud in the completely silent courtroom, her voice steady but filled with the weight of what she was describing, Moore slowly turned his head and looked back at his family members sitting in the wooden courtroom pews behind him. His face showed absolutely no emotion whatsoever. No visible sadness, no regret, no remorse, nothing at all. His blank expression disturbed many people in the courtroom. When the judge asked how he pleaded to the charges, he stated clearly and without hesitation, "Not guilty" to absolutely all charges against him. Davidson Brooks then made an important and significant announcement that caused murmurs throughout the courtroom. She stated that the 3 first-degree murder charges will very likely be upgraded to capital murder charges in the coming weeks as the investigation continues and more evidence is processed. She also announced that the district attorney's office has already made the decision to actively seek the death penalty in this case, given the extreme nature of the crimes and the number of victims. Circuit Court Judge Jim Kitchens, who has presided over many serious criminal cases throughout his career, made a very important and potentially case-changing decision during the hearing that could significantly affect the entire legal proceedings going forward. He formally ordered that Moore must undergo a complete and thorough mental health evaluation conducted by qualified mental health professionals before the legal proceedings can move forward to trial. District Attorney Scott Collum, who has prosecuted numerous serious crimes throughout Mississippi, and called this the absolute worst case he had personally seen in a full decade of prosecuting violent crimes, explained the legal situation very clearly to those gathered. After he goes through that complete evaluation process with mental health professionals, if it turns out that it was not a mental health issue, and there's no legal reason to reduce the severity of the charges or apply any mitigating circumstances, then at that point, this is the absolute worst type of crime you can possibly commit in the state of Mississippi. And the worst type of crimes have to receive the worst type of punishments available under our state law. Judge Kitchens appointed experienced criminal defense attorney Clarissa Harris as Moore's official defense attorney to represent him throughout the entire legal process, from pre-trial hearings, through trial, and any potential appeals. Under Mississippi state law, because Moore is charged with capital crimes that could potentially result in the death penalty being imposed, he is absolutely not eligible for bail under any circumstances and must remain securely held in the Clay County Jail until his trial concludes. A specific trial date has not been officially set yet, as the mental health evaluation must be completely finished first, and the results must be carefully reviewed by both the prosecution and defense teams. After a devastating loss, the Moore and Guineas families have shown strength, unity, and compassion. Despite unimaginable pain, they have spoken about forgiveness, humanity, and the belief that love and family support are essential to healing. To help the survivors, multiple fundraising efforts were launched to cover funeral costs, counseling, and daily living needs. Family-led campaigns received support from across the country, and the United Way of the Golden Triangle region established an official assistance fund to provide continued help. The tragedy gained national attention, with community safety organizations expressing solidarity and calling for prevention and awareness to protect other families in the future. As Cedar Bluff and Clay County move forward, many questions remain unanswered. Investigations and evaluations may bring insight, but they cannot restore what was lost. 6 lives were taken, leaving a permanent impact on the community. This case reminds us that warning signs are not always obvious. Support mental health awareness, look out for one another, and speak up when something feels wrong. Share this story to spread awareness, and subscribe to stay informed on cases that help promote safety and prevention.